Hello, welcome everybody to today's HR Huddle. Happy June. I guess this is the first day of June that we've been with you. So welcome to June. I think it's summer. I know not officially. We hope you're doing well and staying cool. I know there's a heat wave going across the United States. Here in Minnesota, it's been 97 degrees over the weekend. So it was pretty intense. And we heard some clients that their schools were closing for heat, which has never been done before. So we are here today to talk about not having a surprise party, specifically related to feedback. And we have been talking about feedback in this kind of, as we're approaching post-pandemic and being sensitive to where people are. And while we want to do that, if you know us and you've been following us regularly, you also know it's important that we are giving feedback. And so we thought, what's the right balance? And it's been coming up a lot in our leadership programs and in our coaching with our clients. And so we thought, how should we maybe tackle this and address it? And when Renee and I were talking, we thought, one of our philosophies is no surprise parties on performance reviews. And so how can we avoid or mitigate that? And so we thought we would start there and kind of see where this takes us. So Renee, I don't know if there's some, starting thoughts you want to add to that.
Yeah, I guess I would focus in first, Tamara, on the costs of the surprise party, because it is upsetting for people whenever they come to the review or they come to our feedback call and they get feedback for the very first time that they feel like they should have known about. And so it's disappointing, it's frustrating. It reminds me of at the gym, if I've been doing a certain exercise for a long time and then all of a sudden I find out I've been doing it wrong, I think, why didn't someone tell me? I feel like I wasted all this time. And so it's the same thing with your people. When they're not getting that feedback, they feel like they've been wasting their time or spinning their wheels, which is upsetting. It's disappointing. And so I think if we could sort of put that image in our mind, we might be less likely to do it, Tamara, because I don't think that's what we're trying to cause, but that's what happens for people when they come and they get a surprise party at the evaluation.
Yeah. And so that's one of our rules. If we didn't already give them the feedback, then it doesn't get to go in the performance review, because a review is a review. It's looking back on things that we've already talked about. We should be talking about it in a review to say, how do we develop that going forward? So that's the first rule that we have. And then the next rule, if you will, maybe how can we make it as actionable as possible? I have been doing some leadership feedback calls as part of our leadership programs. We do a 360 and then deliver the feedback. And, there's some comments on there that it's not actionable. It's like, I don't know what to do with that feedback, or there's no context. You need to improve communication. Okay. Yeah. How? Is it written communication? Is it in meetings? What does that look like? And so trying to have it be actionable and as specific as possible. And I think in today's climate, one of the things we're worrying about is how do we make sure that we give the feedback to those that need it, still delicately, like we talked about previously, but that we don't step over it. And so, that there is a delicate balance there. There is some compassion to there, but part of the value that we have of our team members is that we give that feedback. So they do know that there's a place that we expect them to improve. And so that's kind of what we were worrying about as we were, coming into today's HR huddle, that, Renee and I were like, gosh, we need to talk about this.
Well, and Tamara, you and I have been talking about this idea of putting some of the feedback in our back pocket. If we get to that evaluation and we've realized there are things we should have been saying along the way and we haven't done it, maybe we've been too busy or we thought it would be too upsetting, then let's make a note of that and go give that performance evaluation without it, and commit to ourselves that a week or 2 weeks after the evaluation that we find a way to address the feedback separately, rather than tucking things into that evaluation that haven't been said before, like you said, because no surprise parties at the evaluation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Well, I guess we might also find as we get to the evaluation that we have too much feedback to provide. And that would be another reason to tuck some of that feedback in our back pocket and make a commitment to spread it out over time, over these next few months, as we're working on jobs together or interacting with each other, finding other opportunities to bring that in, rather than being overwhelming or bringing up a lot of things in the evaluation that we've been sitting on for the last few months.
Well, and I also think prioritizing the feedback. So I don't want a surprise party on the review, but I also don't want to be told, like Renee said, it's like, if I have spinach in my teeth and you didn't tell me and I got back to my hotel room and I've been at a networking event all night, I'm going to be upset. I'm going to be mad. And so please tell me, and, don't withhold that. And, so part of it is, how do we synthesize down the feedback and not step over it? Because there is some feedback that some people need to hear. And feedback's a gift. Feedback helps us, develop other people. And one of the things we were talking about with a group that we're doing some people development or people coaching training, being a better coach for people is, gosh, it feels like a lot. So we look for themes. And that's one way to synthesize it down. And I don't have to give them everything right now, but I don't want to step over the most important feedback for them. And so I could pick the one or two things that are going to make the biggest difference, like non-negotiables. What does that look like? And I think that's important too, because I could have a whole bunch of inputs, but I can't assimilate that. First of all, some of us don't even have the capacity. We've talked about that, just the weariness that we have, but also actionable. We were talking about receiving feedback, and one of the reasons I don't want to be open to receiving feedback, unless it's good, but one of the reasons I don't want to receive feedback is because I have to do something about it. They can't do something about everything on there, and it could be one-offs. And yes, as leaders, we have to manage perception that we're creating, but what's going to be the most important thing? Just like if you do an employee engagement survey, we're not going to address every single little comment on there. I have to synthesize it down. That's probably one of the most difficult tasks, is analyzing the survey and saying, what's the biggest impacts that we're going to get from that? How are we going to get there's some quick hits that we'll get, but there's also some that if we picked one or two things would make a difference. We should do the same thing, when we're giving feedback. So we're not stepping over it, but I don't have to give them everything.
Well, it's one of the reasons, Tamara, why this whole review cycle thing's a little crazy, that we come together once a year and we expect to give feedback and then that's going to work. We really need to have these regular increments of providing feedback. And some firms are doing that quarterly. I would assert it needs to be happening even more than that. It needs to be happening when you experience it with someone. That, last week we worked on an engagement and here I am this week talking about some of the things I think you need to work on. Because otherwise, how can it be actionable? It's right. Just too much. And it's too disconnected from the time in which it happened when we were working together for people to really make a difference with it.
Right. Yeah. And, maybe it's like quarterly, meetings and then huddles. We're advocates of huddles, as we've talked about. How can we make that ongoing? But I think that's important. And one of the things, Renee, I think you and I talked about, that why we wanted to raise this is because sometimes we hear from managers or high potentials or, just even people that might be struggling. Maybe somebody comes to us and says, this person needs some support. Can you provide some coaching? And they're like, I never got that feedback. And that's part of the surprise also. And so we're withholding feedback. And sometimes it's because we're not comfortable with it. Sometimes we don't know how to structure it. Sometimes it's, I'm afraid of the response I'm going to get. Like there's a whole list of reasons why we might not be giving it. But often we hear, I haven't gotten that feedback or that kind of straight feedback or that kind of specific feedback. And so that makes us sad. And that's one of the things to look at, and especially as HR professionals to say, how can we facilitate helping people narrow down what feedback to give and how to word it and do some practice, on how to word it. We practice how to give, verbal feedback, and then we need to translate that into writing. Performance reviews are written. So maybe practicing how we would write it and not writing, you need to grow technically, or you need to improve communication, or your professional image, well, what does that mean? And so how do we craft it? How do we wordsmith it, and teaching people how to be able to do that so that we have the confidence to be able to give it. And I think sometimes, we resist, because we're worried, we go the other way. And instead of giving the feedback, it's like, I think silence is best. We're not going to say anything, but that doesn't develop the person. It doesn't give them the opportunity to grow. And then it actually limits us, because we become the bottleneck. Well, yeah.
Tamara, that's a perfect lead into our webinar tomorrow on capacity, building capacity in your firm. And some of you have untapped resources in your firm. They're on the secret do not use list. No one's over there kind of hands-on helping them grow and develop. We really can't figure them out. Like, how do we get this person to perform? So we just leave them over there on the bench, and then we can't hire or we can't replace them because they're sitting over there not being developed. So that is a big risk. And I also think, sometimes one of the ideas that we're going to talk about in that capacity webinar tomorrow is that sometimes our idea of a perfect resource is too narrow. And so as we're going out there and trying to recruit it, we just have this little tiny, swath of the population that we're looking for. CPA with perfect grades from a particular college with a certain background. And so therefore we can't find enough of those people. Well, here's another wrinkle to that, is that you have some of those people that don't fit in that swath inside your firm. If you could just figure out how to get them the feedback they need, get them that development, you might find you have some diamonds in the rough right there under your feet. So, feedback's just so critical, Tamara. And we want to be careful. We keep saying we want to strike this balance. We want to, I think, go into this evaluation season with a lot of positive feedback and encouraging feedback, but also telling people the things they need to do to move to the next level.
Well, and those people on that secret do not use list are who we're talking about. We need to move away from somebody's better than nobody. And in this capacity crunch that we're experiencing, and we're blessed with an abundance of volume of work and new services and new clients and new services for new clients and, all of it. And so we think, keeping that person, but I like what you just said, and I want to say it again, it limits us from hiring the right person that can do the work, that's going to lift up your team, that's going to, share in the burden. I don't like that word, it's negative, but it's what's right there. But just share in the opportunity that we have. And so I can't do that if I have somebody that's holding us down over there. And first of all, if we're not giving feedback, and then second of all, we're giving feedback, but it's not improving and we're not doing anything about it. And it's scary right now. I understand that because of our capacity, but we can get creative. We can look at, other roles or positions or qualifications for the kind of work. If we looked at the kind of work that could be done, do I have to have it be a CPA, or do I have to hire in the typical structures that we've done? And so I think that do not use list is suspect of what we're talking about here, that we think it's secret, but we all can see it. Their desk is polished. They're leaving at 5 o'clock or 4:45, they're not raising their hand, for additional work. And so we need to figure out, how do we do that? It erodes morale and credibility and respect and trust when we do that. The rest of your team, your high potentials, are watching. And unfortunately, guess who's going to choose to leave if it doesn't get better? Not the secret do not use list person, your high potential. And then we're going to be really sad, and we're going to be up a creek, as we say here in Minnesota. So.
Yes. Well, and the other thing is, Tamara, some of those people, if we've invested some time and energy in them, they might grow up and get better. And so if you're finding yourself feeling like you might want to do that, but you're hopeless and you can't get care and concern for them, you've tried and you've exhausted all those possibilities for yourself and you're just frustrated, and you probably need to go find someone else to get in there and get hands-on with them to see, is there some feedback we could get them or some things we could do to turn them around? But let's figure that out so we can make a decision for them to stay or to go, but not keep them around on the bench.
Yes.
Because I think most of those people would rather be doing a good job, would rather get off the do not use list and get in the team. But for some reason, there's some missing piece there, which somebody else might be able to solve that problem on your team if you have just, done this and just had enough with it, somebody else might be able to get in there and give them some feedback.
Yes. And sometimes we have feedback that we need to give to our leadership team. And sometimes, as HR professionals, again, we're sitting there with feedback we need to deliver to our, maybe our board or our executive committee or, our service line leaders. It could be individual, or it could be something we're doing as a group that may be not working, or that may be impacting, especially our talent right now. It's like, that's the wrong message. Can we, lighten that message about coming back to the office like we've talked about? Or can we lighten the message on hours this summer? And can we get really specific about clients that need to be complete and focus on that and say, how do we do that and create the milestones and timeline? But there might be some messages. That's just one example of feedback that we need to give. And so I think it's similar. It's like, I can't give them everything. I might have a list, we could generate a list, but we can't tackle everything. They can't tackle everything either, just like we were saying about the staff. So I think it goes both ways always, but we do have to then assimilate, narrow down, say, here's the top priorities. If I could request, a couple changes, here's what I would think about. I have some feedback of things that I think we should consider, and I can narrow it down. And I think an HR role is often in a position to be able to do that. And then, meeting with the appropriate leaders, partners, board, whoever it might be, to say, how do we facilitate this, and what can we do about this? Sometimes it's one-on-one. Sometimes it's maybe a department head I need to go speak with. And the same thing applies. It's like, what one or two things I'm going to give feedback to Renee, as my CAS, service line leader. What is that feedback that I would, want her to take and action, and how can I help prioritize it? And I could also find out what hers is. We always talk about that being two-way, but I just want to acknowledge, like, this feedback, sometimes we withhold, or we have surprise parties. Like, the board's like, I didn't know that wasn't working, or that communication, impacted the team like that. It was not meant to be negative, or constraining, or whatever the feeling was. But if they don't know, if they don't get that feedback, they can't fix it or change it, going forward. And they're sad too, because we didn't tell them they had spinach in their teeth. And so sometimes it's our role to step up and say, hey, I have some feedback for you. I don't have to pile on and give them everything, though.
Yeah, and I'm also going to do that with care and concern. Just like when I'm giving feedback to a staff person, that I want to come from that, I want you to get better. It's that same kind of intention and mindset. Because we can, with that firm level feedback, be like, why don't they fix that problem? Why do we still have that problem around here? And just sort of get negative and have those negative interpretations about it, instead of stopping and saying they have a lot of problems on their plate to solve. And let me jump in there and roll up my sleeves and see if I can give them the feedback to solve this particular one, share my insights.
Right.
So always with care and concern, Tamara, and always not having a surprise party. And the ultimate surprise party is the HR person who leaves, and then their exit interview says, I couldn't stand all these unsolved problems. Well, why didn't you jump in and tell us about it? We needed your brain and your ideas to be able to resolve those problems. So those are our principles out of today, I think. No surprise parties, and always with care and concern.
Always. And I like your point. I think that's a good place to, end on is, you as HR professionals, and I know there's a whole bunch of other people that listen to this, but it's our job as leaders to share that feedback, act as, advisors, no matter what role you're in. And it could be to my team, it could be to my partners, it could be to my clients. In the HR role specifically, it is to the leadership team. That is what they expect you to do, is to lead with that feedback and share it and observations, and constructively, and care and concern and all that, with possible action plan, because they can't necessarily see, they're like, I don't need more problems pointed out to me. I need to know how to, solve it. You probably have ideas about how to solve it. So, if you were king or queen for the day, how would you solve it? And I can share that. And so I think that's really important. And so just that continued transparency, trust, we're all here to get better. And, we all respect it and want it. We appreciate people that are in our lives that give us that kind of feedback. So while we're balancing it, we thought we should probably stop and say, don't step over some of these places where you absolutely need to give feedback. Don't hide it, and, or wait, or whatever, void. So
Yes, or hire us later to come in and give that.
Yes.
Let's go ahead and do it now.
Right. And if you want help with that, you can let us know. Yes, we are good at that. But gosh, there's so many other things we could be working on together. Good point, Renee. All right. Well, stay cool wherever you are. We will see you next Monday. And I think Jen is going to be here with a guest because Renee and I are going to be on a business trip. It's our first business trip in 16 months. So Jen will be here next week and on a different topic. We will publish that by Friday, and I will be back the following Monday. So thanks for being with us today, and have a great week. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.